The constant internal battle between ADHD and autism is described by my next guest as like having two siblings who hate each other, dragging one another across the floor. And it's something Jay has to deal with every single day.
I'm what I call a low maintenance friend. I'm the friend that, in my head, we're friends still. But in your head, you may think I don't like you because we've not spoken in 4 months. In my head, we're best friends. Like, that is the perfect relationship for me. Any friendship that's demanding and needing to speak to me every single day doesn't work out very well because I'm just not that person.
This interview is truly fascinating. We delve into topics that seem to keep cropping up on ADHD Chatter, from misophonia, object permanence, masking, and how he's unknowingly collected friends throughout his life that are all neurodivergent. Object permanence is a real thing, right? It's that out of sight, out of mind, and if they're not in your immediate proximity, you can quite literally forget that they exist.
Yeah, and understandably, people get very, very upset with me when I say that to them because they're like, I'm not an object. I'm like, yeah, but...
So if you want to find out how to get a flight to Vienna for 1p, keep on watching. You've been diagnosed as autistic and with ADHD. Is there a particular one, do you think, that is dominant over the other and sort of takes the lead? Or do you think it's unpredictable and it's a interesting blend of the two?
No, it's two siblings that absolutely hate each other in their angry teenage phase in my brain 24/7. They are dragging each other across the room, screaming for mum and dad, and it's just non-stop. Like, none of them win. It's constantly like, the ADHD will be like, I'm bored, I need to go do something, and I'll impulsively go do it. And the second that I'll do it, I'm like, I hate this. Like, one thing I've been doing a lot in the past, maybe like 6 months, is my partner will have a day off, and he'll be like, let's have just a relaxed day. And I'll be like, I need to go see the world. I don't want to be in the house. I need to go out. We need to go into central London. We need to go for a walk. We need to go shopping. And he'll be like, oh, fine, we'll do it. We'll get ready. Reluctantly, we'll go out. The second we get into central London, we'll come out of the tube station and I'll be like, I hate this, I want to go home. And no matter how many times I do this, in the house, I will refuse to listen to him. He knows what's going to happen. And I'm like, no, you don't know me. You don't know this. We are going out. I really want to go out. And the second I put myself in that situation, I'm like, you were right. I won't admit that, but I hate this. I want to go home. So it's just a constant battle in the head of like, this, that, this, that.
It's so relatable. I sometimes get super excited about going out for dinner, and I say to my partner, let's go out for dinner, and she gets really excited, she gets ready. And by the time she's ready, the actual thought of being in a busy restaurant has caught up with me, and I no longer want to go out for dinner. And that can happen within the space of an hour. So I guess that's kind of similar. It's that sort of the dopamine, the thought of doing something is intensely powerful at the beginning. But then the actual reality of doing it, the effort and the consequences, the sort of side effects of being in a busy place and what comes with that as a neurodivergent, sort of puts a shush to the excitement and can overpower it again.
Yeah.
Super interesting. And your partner, do you think, is there an understanding of neurodiversity in your relationship?
Yeah. We met when I was already diagnosed and I already kind of knew everything. So I kind of was able from the get-go be like, oh, by the way, this and this, like, surprise. And because of that, we've been able to communicate a lot more about it because I know why I'm acting the way I'm acting sometimes. And therefore he now knows that I'm doing that because of this, and it makes it a lot easier.
Can you look back at, just drawing on personal experience and seeing if there's relatability, can you look back on your past relationships and see how perhaps an understanding of ADHD could have made things work out differently?
Oh my God, yeah. Like every single relationship, whether that's romantic or even just like platonic, like friendships or old bosses and managers who, once I got my diagnosis, I was just sitting there in my head being like, I wish I could go back and just know this, so that when I'm having that argument and that discussion with you, I can be like, actually, this is why this is happening. I understand it now. And I had a whole period after getting diagnosed of this like grief cycle of just sitting there in my head going over and over things, being like, maybe I could still be friends with that person had I have known. Maybe I wouldn't have quit that job. Maybe I wouldn't have been fired from that job. Maybe I'd still be in that relationship. Maybe I never would have got into that relationship. All these things afterwards because I just finally like unlocked this jigsaw that was like waiting and missing pieces for so long.
You mentioned friendships there. What's your relationship throughout your life been with maintaining friendships?
I'm what I call a low maintenance friend. I'm the friend that, in my head, we're friends still. But in your head, you may think I don't like you because we've not spoken in 4 months. In my head, we're best friends. Like, that is the perfect relationship for me. A low maintenance, check in when we remember each other, meet up when we meet up. That's for me. Any friendship that's demanding and needing to speak to me every single day doesn't work out very well because I'm just not that person. I physically cannot be that person. I don't like text messages. I hate phone calls. I'm just not a communicator. That's not for me. But it doesn't mean we're not friends.
Object permanence is a real thing, right? Like, it's that out of sight, out of mind. And if they're not in your immediate proximity, you can quite literally forget that they exist.
Yeah, and understandably, people get very, very upset with me when I say that to them because they're like, I'm not an object. I'm like, yeah, but explain that to my brain. Like, it's not my fault. I'm really not trying to just see you as an object and be like, you don't exist anymore. Like, you're not fun to play with. It's not that. It's just, yeah, I've forgotten, not of you, just in this moment, you're not in my brain. You'll come into it at some point, and I won't be like planning for that to happen. It will just happen. And I'll text you, like, most likely.
You're doing something else, right? You're chasing the dopamine. Something else is in that moment keeping you entertained. But the best thing is when you can just go back to a friendship after a significant amount of time, or some time has passed and it's like nothing's changed. Those friendships, I think, are super valuable to have that, whether you're both ADHD or one is and one, but to have that understanding, to be able to have that break without a bombardment of texts and without shame and guilt, and to actually recognize that you might go for a week or 2 weeks, 6 months, a year without seeing each other. But when you do, go to Nando's, everything's fine. And
I think now I'm at a point where pretty much all of my friendships are exactly like that. They are that level. And my favorite thing about all of this was when I got diagnosed and I started speaking to friends about it. It kind of created this domino effect amongst my friendships. It's like 2 months later, they'd come to me being like, yeah, I've got an assessment for ADHD next week. And then it was like the next one be like, oh, I'm diagnosed now. And it was funny to see just how I'd been throughout all my jobs in London, collecting 1 or 2 people from each one that I kept in contact with, and those being the neurodiverse ones, and neither of us knowing why that was happening. It was just, I was like, I like you. You're my person. I won't speak to you for a year, but you're still my person. And then that's obviously wise, because we just had the same level of maintenance and the same way of thinking.
It's true. You subconsciously are attracted and drawn towards people that you know are going to give you the most reward with the least resistance. Especially, I relate to that. And you know that if people are not going to be bombarding you with text, and actually you can have, like we said, like time passes and then meet up and everything's okay. Like, they're the friendships that are actually going to be the sticky ones and the ones that are going to last. You mentioned assessment there, and I was curious to know what was the trigger, the turning point that actually made you go and seek an assessment for, I believe it was ADHD first?
Yeah. It was the pandemic. It was being locked up at home. I didn't deal with lockdown well at all. I think I was someone who, prior to that, couldn't stay at home. I couldn't be alone. I couldn't sit with my thoughts. It was not for me. So I was constantly out. I was constantly busy. And then having to kind of stop that lifestyle and be locked in a house, I was really forced to just deal with my head. And that's what kind of got me started to think that, like, something's not right. And the longer into lockdown we went, the more I was taken away from stimulation that I was used to, the more I became sensitive to everything. And it just got to a breaking point where I couldn't even go to Tesco's and, do a little shop, because I'd walk in and the lights would be too bright and the noise would be too much. And I'd find myself getting so aggravated and like I needed to just leave immediately. And I was like, this isn't who I am. Like, I would be out in a club 4 or 5 days a week prior to this and still be in the office at 9 a.m. the next day. And now I can't even go and buy bread. Like, what's happened? And that was the trigger for me, with being like, something's not right here.
And I suppose when you got that diagnosis, was there a sort of moment where you looked back and you were able to spot neurodiversity in your earlier years?
It was so obvious. I feel like now I know what ADHD is. I was a poster child for this. Like, I should have had that diagnosis, but I wasn't the poster child that was popular in the 90s. I wasn't the naughty kid that couldn't sit in class without screaming and fighting and disrupting everyone else's learning. I was the dreamer. I was the one that would be really great in his exams if he just paid attention. I was that kid. I wasn't problematic because I didn't want to put myself in that position of getting the attention, but I was struggling in certain ways, and it wasn't because I wasn't intelligent enough. It was purely because I was not in the right environment for me to learn. And then that trickled out all the way through, like, my teenage years into young adulthood. Like, there was just so many instances where it was so obvious that the problem was just, I can't work like this, that just went overlooked.
Looking back, can you see any particular aspects of you that thought, gosh, that could have really been alleviated if we had just known and there was a bit more support there, some particular traits, like particular struggles that you had when you were young, that if you just knew about ADHD and neurodiversity could have been alleviated and you really could have had help with?
I think looking back, I don't see it as much of a big issue anymore, but when I was at school, I was, in my head, the loner. In reality, I wasn't. I was everyone's friend, but I also really wasn't. I had kind of learned to go into school and put on this character and this mask, and I would go in, I'd be friends with everyone, I'd talk to everyone, I would sit with different groups here and there, and I was I guess, liked kid. But in my head, I had zero friends. And it was merely just, I need to get through these school years. So I would go in and just be like friends with everyone, but never actually friends with anyone. And looking back, I'm like, that's such a shame for me to be in a year group of like 100 kids and actually leave with no friends, but not through like them realizing it's happening or me realizing it's happening. It's not like there was an issue between us. It was merely just in my head being like, how do you get through school? Well, you just be friends to everyone, but then you go home and you're not friends because it's not real. I don't know. It's a really weird one and hard one to explain, but it's just this character I built in my head of how to get through school.
The content you make now on social media, do you think that's a bit of a character, a bit of a defense, a front?
Absolutely. I think it's something I've thought about quite a lot in the past year as well, because I've been really thinking of how I can diversify my content and how I can start sharing more of myself. But there's always this like internal barrier between me and actually making that content. And it's not that the content I make isn't me. It 100% is. But it's just one section of me that happens during the day. It's like my burst of ADHD energy is just put into this one video, and then that's that. But there are so many other layers to it that I don't really share with people. And yeah, it's something I'm trying to work on. I'm like, okay, how do I start breaking that barrier down and showing people more of my life and who I am? But I do really enjoy making that content at the same time. So I'm like, I don't really want to diversify too much because this is fun, and making other content, I guess, where I do share more of myself doesn't seem as fun in my head, even though people probably do want to see it and would enjoy it.
Do you think you've personally been through a big journey of self-awareness and self-growth since your diagnoses? And are there any noticeable differences between what you thought was you prior to who you think you are now?
Yeah, I think before getting diagnosed, I guess I just thought I was lazy and problematic, which I now know I'm not in the slightest. But prior to that, I always had this idea in my head that like I just didn't care enough about anything, that I didn't have any drive to an extent, and that I was kind of just riding the ride and just going through life, and that was that. Now it's all a lot more clearer. It's like, no, I'm actually a very calculated person. When I think I have no drive, it's like I look back and actually everything I've done up until this point has always been the goal. And I've always worked towards a goal, but yet somehow still believed that I wasn't a driven person. And now I'm a lot more able to kind of advocate for that and speak up for myself and kind of set those boundaries and be like, look, it's not that I'm being lazy. It's that I need to do this my way.
Well, we can give ourselves a kinder time when we have an awareness of how our brain works, and perhaps it might not be in line with how we thought society expects us to function. And as soon as you have that awareness, like you've been through, many of us have been through, suddenly you can not beat yourself up like so much when you just have a sofa day, or you have a day where you just don't understand why you can't think in a certain way that you need to do in order to do a task. I think you can, without that awareness of neurodiversity, you can really get yourself into a spiral of negative self-talk and low self-esteem, because you just don't understand why you can't do what you think everyone should be able to do. And then you get this diagnosis, and it's just like this, okay, there's a reason. There's a reason why X, Y, and Z happens, and that's okay, and there's actually no shame, because, yeah, sure, there's challenges, but there's also tremendous strengths in neurodiversity, and we see it in your work with the amazing creativity that you're doing, and you're offering yourself up in a slightly different way and letting people get to know you. And I suppose if we were to go into that a bit more and ask your partner what he would say if we asked him what Jay was like.
Oh, what would he say? I think he would just say he's crazy.
Crazy.
I think he would just be like, yeah, he's a psychopath, but in a good way. In a way that's just like, I'm so up and down. Like every day, every couple of hours, a new version of me is presented, and it's just ever changing.
What would you think your love language is if I were to ask you what do you need from a partner when you're in that period of overwhelm after you've recorded a video? What do you need in those moments?
Space. Like 100% space. And just someone who understands that me being quiet, me not responding, me just being kind of like a shell of who I am is nothing to do with you. It's not about you. I'm not mad at you. I don't hate you. I need me time. I've shut down. I'm rebooting almost, like I've crashed. I'm rebooting.
Does he identify with the traits of neurodiversity, or would you say he's neurotypical?
I'd say he's neurotypical. Yeah. But an ally,
How would you say to him or show him that you loved him?
Ooh. I'm having to think about this answer because he's going to watch this and then he's going to drag me if I don't say anything correct. I think it's just giving attention would be the main way I do it. Is like I'm someone who can be so closed off and so like going into my shell and don't like being touched or don't want noise and want to be left alone. So for me to go over and give someone a hug and genuinely mean it not being like we have to do this because we're greeting or saying goodbye kind of thing, and me coming over and wanting to talk and want to share like something or ask you questions, that is me kind of showing that I care, because this is stuff that doesn't come naturally to me. So for me to do that, it means I am extremely comfortable, and that I genuinely like being around you.
You must feel safe around him to be able to break through that wall.
Yeah. I think it takes time to build, for sure. And yeah, I'm not like that with most people. I mean, a lot of friends that I've known for years probably still don't get a hug from me. I remember I actually have one friend who, maybe after 3-4 years of us knowing each other, we said goodbye, and she's a very like touchy-feely friend. She jumps in the hug. She will lean herself on you as you're like on a sofa. She's very up in your space. And for me, I was always like, I'm uncomfortable, but like I do like you, like so. I guess I'll learn. And there was one day when she was like, "Okay, bye, love you," and I was like, "Yeah, bye, love you." And I didn't think anything of it; it just come out. And she was like, did you just say you love me? And I was like, huh? Like, are we making this a thing? And she was like, yes. I was like, okay, great. Because it's just not something that naturally comes out of me. And that took her 4 years to get. So she must be grateful.
People spend years in therapy trying to get those words out or to cry. So for your friend to be able to, or for you to be able to break through that or to do that in front of someone, you know, is a huge testament, I think, powerful to the strength of that friendship that you had.
Yeah, and I think it's just something that is naturally in me, but is not natural to me. And in moments like that, when these kind of things happen, they always happen organically, and it's not being forced. I'm not thinking about it. It just happens. And that's when I know I'm like, okay, I'm actually comfortable with this person, because I'm just kind of, I guess, mirroring their behavior to an extent, but in a way that's not uncomfortable. Because I don't do that with every friend, but it doesn't mean that I don't love them. It just means that, like, that's not who they are, so I don't mirror it. I kind of mirror their love language to an extent, but only when I'm comfortable enough to do so.
Yeah. God, well, I think many people listening would be very happy if they heard their partner say what you just said about yours.
Yeah. I mean, just a note to all my friends watching this: if I've not said love you, doesn't mean I don't. All right? Don't be giving me any shit for this.
There will be many people listening who are in a relationship and they are, for whatever reason, having issues with ADHD. Would you have any advice for someone who is in a relationship where, let's say, they have ADHD? What would be useful for their partner, do you think, to understand? And I know it's obviously very individualistic, but based on your experience, what would be a good starting place for the other person to have an awareness of how ADHD can be?
I think the main thing is just, it's not personal. Like, once someone can look past their own kind of ego in this scenario, once they can stop going, is this about me? Take me out of it and just look at it for what it is. Because the ADHD person may not be able to communicate exactly how they're feeling, what it is they're going through, and we do struggle with communication a lot. So in those moments, it's so easy where if you go into it thinking about yourself, letting your ego take control and thinking, but why are they doing this to me? You're going to completely miss all the messages that are subliminal, that are there, that they are trying to tell you in different ways, that is going to actually help you get through this. I think I've always struggled with communicating, and it's not that I struggle with expressing my feelings. It's that I'll struggle with starting the conversation or finding the words to start the conversation. So I'll kind of find ways to dodge it and get away from it and not have to deal with it. But if I'm brought into a position where someone's straight up asking me, I'm able to break that barrier down and get through it. But if someone's coming at you in a way where they're upset now because you're doing something that's upsetting them, but it's your ADHD, and they're coming in to attack, you're not getting nothing out of me other than, not my problem. It's your problem. Leave me alone. Like, I can't do this. Bye. Out the door. So yeah, my biggest advice is just, you need to look at it for what it is, look at it for what the problem is, and try and take your feelings and their feelings out of it and just assess, okay, ADHD is into play here. How do we navigate this?
That's really useful. And I wish I had that advice years ago. Thank you, Jay. I'm excited to find out about your ADHD item. And I ask all my guests to tell me an item that most represents ADHD in their life. Don't worry, you don't have to put these on. And you said headphones. I will pass them to you.
Thank you.
And could you explain why headphones represents ADHD?
I want to see if they fit first.
They actually look really good. Yeah, they're
Is this a look?
yeah, I like that. We'll use that for the thumbnail.
Okay, well, thumbnail. Headphones. The reason I've picked these is because this is quite literally the thing I can't live without. They're almost like a safety blanket, I guess, every time I go out into the world. I use headphones, noise cancelling primarily, for every single day situations. I wear them at home. I wear them if I'm going out. If I'm with friends, I'll always have headphones in. And I never really understood why I gravitated to them, but it is because it's this ability to, A, block out noise that's triggering to me, that's too much, but also being able to control what I hear when I'm out and be able to just block out things that I know are going to overwhelm me.
Before you realised that you were sensitive to sounds, what did that look like? Did you just get angry?
Yeah, yeah. To be honest, yeah. I've always had headphones on me before even finding out,
Right.
and I never really knew why. It was just one of those things that I could never leave the house with. It's like, okay, keys, headphones, phone, good to go. Wallet, maybe I'll remember that, who knows. But those are the essentials. I have to have the ability to switch off and put music in. And prior to knowing why, I thought I just really liked music. I thought that's all it was. But the more I think on it, the more I'm like, no, because I can literally listen to the same song on repeat for a month. And it's not that I'm really listening to the song anymore. It's that I just find comfort in the ability to drown everything out and not have to think for a second and have my brain preoccupied with something so it can shut off and just relax for a minute.
It's interesting because you see someone walking down the street, and not so much anymore, but before I would just assume that they're listening to something. I wouldn't automatically assume that they're using the headphones to actually not put something in, to actually block something out. And before we started filming, we spoke about something called misophonia, which is a new word for me, but the sensation and what it describes isn't. It's something I've heard lots and lots, and I'll let you describe. What would you say misophonia is?
Misaphonia is, in my mind, it's this irrational fear of noise and sounds that aren't in my control. And when I say fear, it's not that someone's going to start chewing and I'm going to jump and scream. It's not that I'm scared of it. It's just that it causes this irrational response. It triggers my fight or flight. And for years, I could never understand and explain why certain sounds would get me so angry. And it wasn't just on that's really annoying. It's my pulse is racing, my heart is going, I'm sweating, I'm physically clawing at myself to get away from this noise. And I either have to confront it or I have to run from it. But confronting it makes you look like the jerk because they're not doing anything wrong. But in my head, I will tell myself that they are doing this on purpose. They're doing this to piss me off. They are targeting me. This is all an attack on me and who I am. And it's not that deep at all. But it just builds up inside of you and there's no rationalizing with it.
So just so I'm clear, because it's not something I personally relate to, if you heard someone chewing on a train, would that be enough to set you off?
Yeah, I will get up and move carriages, 100%.
What if you were in a restaurant and you heard the table next to you slurping on a cocktail?
I hate them. I hate that person. I hate them so much. I can't wait for them to leave. This has ruined my dinner.
That must be really debilitating.
Yeah, I mean, to some extent it is. It's just annoying because I've always kind of watched people around me that I'm with when I'm having these moments and how they just don't notice it. They just don't care. And I'm like, that's just not fair. I'm so jealous that you are able to just sit here and not even process this annoyance because it's all my brain can process. I cannot think about anything else while I can hear that noise. And that's another reason why these are so important to me, because in those moments where I can't get away, where I have to deal with it, my choice is I sit there and push through it, which will then have a knock-on effect to my entire day. Or I reach for my headphones. I block it out. I say to my friend, my partner, whoever I'm with, give me a minute, I'll talk to you when we're off this train. I put my headphones in because it's the only way I can get through it without it consuming me.
Do you find that your ADHD medication, and I want to talk about that, do you find that helps with misophonia?
I think it did. I think when I was taking it, I'm not now, not by choice, but we'll get into that.
Yeah.
when I was taking it, I found it massively reduced a lot of those things. That being said, I did find that although it helped a lot with the ADHD and the sensitivities, it kind of, in one aspect, allowed my autism to be like, hi, there's room for me now, and take center stage, which is something I've realized now, having come off the ADHD meds, that the autism seems to be creeping back in, like closing the door a bit, and the ADHD is like, my time, like, woo. But yeah, it definitely helped with things like getting overwhelmed by sounds. I was able to manage it a lot better whilst I was on those meds.
When did you start taking ADHD medication?
Oh, probably 2.5, 3 years ago now.
And what was it that you were taking?
I was taking, what was it? Alvance, 40 milligrams, which is lisdexamfetamine.
If you were to describe, and I appreciate that it's very individualistic to everyone, if you were to describe how ADHD medication changed your experience with ADHD, what would you say?
I think it finally put me in control. Yeah, it was kind of like I was able to just be in control of my brain a bit more. I was able to pick where I focused. I was able to keep my energy stable. I wasn't so up and down anymore. I was just good. I'd wake up, take my meds, and I'd just be alert. I would be there until the evening when it was time to wind down and go to sleep. It kind of just made me feel like what I imagine everyone around me has always felt like. And it really pissed me off. It really made me angry. I was like, this is not fair. You get this for free. Like, everyone else in my life has been able to wake up every day and live like this. But however many years I have. And I have not. I felt cheated.
Were there any side effects you experienced?
It was rough. Yeah. Adapting to the meds was horrific. I really did not get lucky with it. I know some people get given a medication, they start taking it, and they're like, this is great, love it. That's not how it worked for me. The first round that I tried, they gave me a lot of negative thoughts and made me very, very kind of depressed, and kind of just took my brain to a place it's never been before. And I just one day literally was like, I'm not taking that anymore because this is scary, I don't like it. And I stopped for about 3 months and went back to my doctor and was like, by the way, doc, I've been lying to you. I've not taken them, sorry. This is why. And they were like, okay, you should have just told us. Didn't have to run away and hide from it, but fine. And then the next ones I tried ended up being the best ones for me, but it was a rough period. I took them and I didn't sleep for a week. Like, not a minute of rest. And ironically, it was also the week that I started a new job, so I was going into the office 5 days a week. But it was weird. My brain had never been so on. I was knocking work out left, right, and center. I was so on it. But I was going to the bathroom every 2 hours to put eye drops in because my eyes were so dry because they hadn't slept. So it was rough. I didn't enjoy that process, but once I got through it, it was really worth it.
When did you stop taking them?
Beginning of November, so about 3.5 months ago now.
And why did you stop taking them?
The shortage.
Right.
I've just not been able to get hold of them anywhere. I was trying everything I could to get hold of these meds, and I'd be calling 50, 60 plus pharmacies and no one had them. And yeah, I was just chasing down whatever I could. I'd be getting half a prescription here and there, and this was from like October. And then by November, everywhere I called was just like, sorry.
And was there a noticeable shift in your ability to think and function in the way that you were before?
Absolutely. Like, the second I come off them, I was okay for a little bit, and I was like, okay, this isn't so bad. A week went by, I was like, just feeling a bit weird now. Now that it's been 3.5 months, I think I've completely regressed back to who I was before the meds. And it's shit. To put it bluntly, it's not fun. It's infuriating because I can see myself missing deadlines and struggling with my energy and having all these ideas, but just no ability to activate and make them happen. And after having 2.5, 3 years of this unlocked potential, having it locked away again is making me mad, especially because it's not my fault. I'm not doing anything wrong. I just can't access my meds. And I'm now having to try and relearn how to navigate this world without meds because I don't know when they're going to come back. And when they do come back, I'm going to have to go back through the process again. And it's not going to be as smooth as just, my pills are here, I can take them, because now I've got to get used to them again. So I'm just like, it feels like 3 years of work has just been ripped away and no one's really helping.
I'm going to put a load of information in the show notes if anyone's listening and they're in a similar situation to you, information on the shortage. I'm just curious to know, it interfered with your ability to think and to work. Did it interfere with anything in your relationship?
I think it has, and it probably will. At the moment, I think we're navigating it quite well. I think we knew what was happening from the get-go. And because of that, it was an immediate conversation. I don't have my meds. And I'm able to just be like, I need you to do this because I can't. And he's very understanding. He's very like, I'll do it. Like bathing the dog. I can't. No. It's just a lot. There's a lot of textures. There's a lot of noise. There's a lot of him trying to jump out the bath and get water all over me. There's muddle up the wall now. And it's too much. So I'll just look at him and be like, and he'll go and do it. Because he's like, I can do this. I can take the lead in this. Or if I can't go out that night because I just can't. My brain's like, no, we're not doing this. He's very much like, that's fine, we'll stay in, no problem. Or he'll go alone and I'll stay at home. It's totally fine. So at the moment, we're dealing with it quite well because we knew this was going to happen. But that's not to say that things could happen if it continues.
Yeah. Well, it's amazing that you got that awareness and support from a partner. And when times are not regulated or times are not supported by medication, that you can feel safe in the knowledge that he knows how to support you when you're feeling in those vulnerable states, which is an amazing position to be in. And again, it just shows the bond that you two must have and how an awareness of ADHD, communication between partners, is massively beneficial.
Yeah, it's critical. It's the only way you'll get through it, to be honest, is if you're able to be honest about it and both people are able to have an understanding.
I asked my audience to tell me their woes and put them in a washing machine because do you forget your washing in the washing machine?
Oh my God, yes.
Okay.
And then I wash it again and then forget about it again. Then I have to wash it again. It's a struggle.
It's the ADHD tax, isn't it? We sort of have to, the energy bills of having to rewash clothes 3 or 4 times.
Yeah. I try just not to look at the bills.
Yeah.
It's negative. Don't need that.
I had no idea that so many of my struggles had anything to do with ADHD. For example, overthinking sentences before speaking, rephrasing things 100 times in my head. Okay, maybe we'll start with that one. Overthinking sentences before speaking. Is that something you relate to? Yeah.
But I think I'm more of I'll do it before I get to the conversation. So I will have entire arguments and create entire scenarios in my brain when I'm in the shower for no reason, just in case I have to have that conversation with whoever. It can sometimes be a stranger. It can sometimes be me preempting an argument I might have with someone on the street whilst walking my dog because they don't like dogs, say, for example, and I'll be in the shower thinking of what I would say to that person, which is handy because then when it happens, I know what to say because I'm like, well, I've rehearsed this. You haven't because it's completely normal to not rehearse conversations with strangers in your head, but I have, so I win.
It's fascinating. I rehearse conversations too, and I've just thought that everyone always did that. If I go into a meeting or a social situation, I am in the shower, like you said, rehearse. Do you think that's an autistic trait?
It could be. I mean, I guess it's a way of like preempting a social situation, knowing that you're going to struggle with the social cues anyway.
Yeah.
So like, let's just go in prepared and rehearsed.
And actually, when the time comes around, you you rarely fall back on the script that you've learned.
Actually, I can't remember it.
Yeah.
Yeah. No idea, but I've had this conversation before, so.
Yeah. You said the word preemptive, and the next bit is preemptively explaining myself before doing anything. Having trouble making and maintaining eye contact. How are you with eye contact? And do you feel like if you're not making eye contact, you're able to pay attention more?
Me and eye contact, it's a rough one. I've learnt a trick, which is an absolute life changer for me. If you look at the bridge of people's noses, they think you're looking at them in the eyes, but you're not. And that is how I've gotten through life. And now my partner will joke about this a lot. He'll be like, look at me in the eyes. And I'll be looking at him and he's like, not my nose. And I just can't physically bring myself to do it. But I know society expects you to, because if you don't, it's rude. So yeah, that's my little trip for that one.
Yeah.
Is bridge of the nose.
That's really useful. I saw someone say on social media that you can either have my undivided attention or you can have my eye contact, but you can't have both.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
And I heavily related to that.
Yeah. I think one thing that also gets me as well is if I do have to try and force myself to do eye contact, what eye do I look at? Because I can't do both. So I'm then in my head bouncing between each eye because I'm like, I don't know which one I'm meant to look at. No one's given me the rule book to this. Like, what do I do?
Then you stress out because you think you look weird.
Yeah. And then I don't know what you said to me because I'm just looking at which eyes. I'm like, which one do I choose?
Very, very relatable. Having trouble paying attention to or recalling what people were saying. I guess that's similar to the eye contact. Just on a personal note, if you're like, do you ever have issues with word recall? If you're in a conversation and you're saying, can words just leave you? Words that you frequently say.
Yeah. And you're like, oh, sorry, just give me a second. I can't think of the word. And then you end up just changing the topic because it's gone now and I'm starting to think about something else.
Yeah.
All the time.
Words that we use, like social media is a word that I probably used every day for the last 10 years. And frequently it can disappear from my vocabulary really bizarrely. And then I'll walk away from that social situation and it will obviously come back. But I just get so frustrated with myself because I've just made myself look silly in front of that person.
I think that's also just like the opposite of what we were saying earlier, though, is like we preempt conversations and we kind of come up with sentences in our head before we say them. But in the exact same way, we overanalyze everything we've said afterwards.
Yeah.
And there's always something we could have said better. There's always something we could have explained better. And we'll be thinking about that for the rest of the day. Whereas everyone else kind of just, they've finished talking now. It's done, like conversation over. But I don't think I've ever once in my life had a conversation that I've not thought about immediately after I've exited the situation.
You're lying in bed, just staring at the ceiling, thinking, God, they hate me.
Yeah. Like, you idiot, why did you say that? Like, why are you like this?
Yeah. Very relatable. Panicking and making mistakes when someone is watching me work. Interrupting people and not knowing when to chime in. I guess that's a follow-on from what we were saying earlier. Do you think do you find yourself interrupting people? Again, that probably goes back to that social cue thing.
I think I'm the opposite. Because I'm so concerned about interrupting people, I don't speak. Because I'm always waiting for this perfect moment in which it's my turn to speak. And I'll know what I want to say, but I'm waiting for them to take a breath or for them to give me an indication that, like, I can talk now. And then they've changed the topic. And I'm like, well, forget what I had to say then. Like, never mind. Yeah. But for them, they're like, well, he had nothing to input. And it's not that at all. It's just, I don't know when it's my turn and I don't want to be rude.
Do you find there's like sometimes a really frustrating period where they don't stop talking and you really want to get a point into a bit that they've said, but because they haven't allowed a pause for you to interrupt, there's like an internal frustration because you really wanted to get something across, but they've moved on.
Yeah, that and the fact that I've probably already finished what they were going to say already. So I'm just like, can you just get to the point that I already know you're getting to? Like, can I just finish this for you so that I can then say what I want to say? not in like a rude way. It's just, I know what you're saying already because I've listened to it and I've thought 10 steps ahead of it already as you're going through it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. It's like someone said the other day, if they hate it when they say the punchline first and then the story to get to the punchline. Like as ADHDers, just tell us the punchline. If we know that, then we're not interested in the lead up to it.
Yeah, we don't need the rest.
Yeah.
Like, I don't need the details. You'll be lucky if I've remembered the punchline.
Got a bit of a closing tradition on the podcast, Jay, and that is to ask, what's the most impulsive thing you've ever done?
This week?
This week, yeah. Today.
Most impulsive thing I've ever done. It's probably back when I was working in an office and it just wasn't for me. And I was getting a bit like, I need to go and do something exciting. So I open my laptop and I'm working away and I stumble upon like a flights website. And before I know it, I was like in a queue to try and get 1p flights. And I got them, but it was for that week during the work week. And I just kind of sat there and was like, and my manager was right next to me. I was like, hey, can I not come to work Thursday and Friday?
Where were you going? Where was the trip to?
I ended up going to Vienna.
Vienna, nice.
For 2p.
For 2p?
Yeah, 1p each way.
Oh, I see. 1p there, 1p back.
Yeah.
Right, okay.
It was amazing. Yeah. And I was like, well, that's it. I guess I'm going to Vienna this weekend.
That's crazy. Who was the airline?
I think it was Vueling. I think they had like a crazy like 1p sale where like a certain amount of flights were going to be 1p per seat. And I managed to stumble upon it during work hours. And before I knew it, I was like, whoop. You didn't really get to choose the dates. It just kind of gave them to you. And I was like, well, it's 2p. I can't not go.
And when you were over that exciting dopamine booking phase and you were sat on the plane, were you still excited?
A little bit, but I also had never gone away solo at that point. It was my first solo trip and I'd done no research and no planning. So I was a bit like, well, this could either be really fun. And the entire trip ended up becoming a huge impulse to the point where one night I almost had to sleep in a train station in the middle of a place called, I think it's called Melk. And there was a thunderstorm, rain everywhere, but it's because I woke up that morning and was like, let's get a train to this place and then let's jump on this boat. And I jump on a boat and then about 3 hours later, it drops me off at a random town. And I'm like, okay, how do I get home? It's Sunday, so everything's closed. And I got to the station and as I got there, the train had the doors open. I was like, is this my train? I guess I'll just jump on it. And if I had missed that, I would have been stranded in Melk for the night in the rain.
Gosh. Well, you made it back alive.
Yeah, I got through the trip.
Yeah, 2p plus expenses.
Yes, yeah. It was a very cheap holiday.
This has been fascinating. Thank you very much, Jay.
Thank you for having me.